Is this your math or a daycare project? He sneered, holding up the Excel sheet like it had personally insulted his manhood. That was the moment I knew, really knew, that the jackass with a tie clip shaped like a dollar sign was going to ruin everything. I'd survived 2 recessions, a hostile takeover, and a CFO who once did acid before the earnings call, but this smug 30-something MBA with his TikTok quotes and PowerPoint bravado. It was going to be the death of our books. The rest of the room laughed politely. Not too hard because they still needed me to fix their budget recons, but just enough to let him know they'd like to keep their jobs. I didn't laugh. I just looked at the cell he'd cleaned up, the one that 2 seconds ago handled tax deferral logic for our German subsidiary. Now it was a zero, a hard, dumb zero. You didn't need this, right? He grinned at me, deleting another column, this one responsible for revenue recognition compliance. Simpler is smarter. And right around here, if you're part of the 97% of folks who listen to these stories but haven't hit subscribe, fix that, would ya? It really keeps this crew running and helps us keep delivering the good stuff. Even my cat knows to hit the damn bell. Anyway, I should have snapped. Should have tossed my laptop out the 14th floor window and screamed. I built that model through 2 SAP migrations and a ransomware scare. But I didn't. I just nodded like I hadn't just watched him light a financial fuse with a Zippo full of arrogance. He thought Excel was just fancy math art. What he didn't know was that spreadsheet held 6 internal controls, 3 conditional flags, 4 hidden audit trails, and a macro that auto-formatted quarterly statements to match 5 different GOP jurisdictions. I know that sounds like a lot, but it had to be. Because real money doesn't give a damn about streamlining. Real money bites you when you're sloppy. And this guy? He was all jawline, no guardrails. I sat through the rest of the meeting, nodding as he proposed replacing our forecasting method with something called a revenue radar, which was apparently a circle graph with colors that matched his slides. He asked the intern if she could AI the expense report. She said yes. I marked the time, 10:47 a.m. That's when the integrity of our books officially flatlined. The insult stung, but the silence afterward, that was worse. Nobody looked at me. Not even the VP who once called me the financial firewall after I caught a vendor overcharging us $600K. It's like I'd already been ghosted by the company while still sitting in the chair. Maybe they thought I'd retire. Maybe they thought I was obsolete. Maybe they just didn't care anymore. What they didn't know was that I'd already started backing up every version of that model, for years. I had zipped folders named by quarter, with revision notes, control logs, and timestamped calculations that would make an auditor weep with gratitude. My work wasn't pretty, but it was bulletproof. And the bullet, it was coming. It happened on a Tuesday. HR pinged me with one of those nauseatingly cheerful calendar invites titled Quick Touch Base. I clicked it, already knowing. I'd been around long enough to recognize the digital smell of termination, like the scent of old printer toner and stale coffee mixed with cowardice. I walked in to find the HR rep, Melinda, or maybe Miranda, something with overly plucked eyebrows, already seated, arms folded like she was bracing for turbulence. Next to her sat Chad, CFO in training wheels, freshly flushed from a $90 haircut and too much Axe body spray. His expression hovered somewhere between smug and constipated. "Thank you for coming in," Miranda Melinda began, smoothing her blouse like this was a first date, not an execution. "We're going in a new direction," she said, as if my job had just grown legs and walked away on its own. "We really appreciate everything you've done for the company," Chad added, trying on sincerity like a clearance suit. "It's just your role no longer aligns with our vision for the future." Right, vision, that magical word used to justify gutting experience in favor of shiny titles and younger LinkedIn profiles. Of course, I replied, voice like glass over gravel, happy to support the transition. They looked relieved. Idiots. Then came the kicker. They wanted me to train my replacement. 2 weeks, full handoff, all documentation, all tools, everything. I nodded. "Absolutely," I said, smiling like I wasn't already planning my internal eulogy in Excel formulas. I walked out of that room like I'd just closed a deal, not lost a career. No tears, no dramatics, just calm, controlled. Because I knew something they didn't, I built the architecture. And this fool they'd brought in to replace me, Connor, I think his name was, looked like the human embodiment of a cash flow for Dummies audiobook. Training began the next day. I watched him click through models like a toddler with a remote control, blissfully unaware of the traps he was springing. He disabled formulas, hard-coded values, deleted comment cells I'd painstakingly written after 11 p.m. coffee binges. When he renamed Revenue Defertor 2 to Money Later V2, I knew we were fully in the upside down. I didn't stop him. I didn't correct. I documented. Quietly. Precisely. I started a log file, time, date, sheet name, change made, potential impact, like a forensic accountant narrating a murder in real time. On the outside, I was the picture of grace. I told him he was doing great. I offered him notes with soft suggestions like, "You might want to double-check that cell reference, it was tied to a few things." He nodded, deleted it anyway. He didn't know that line triggered error checks across 7 budget tabs, that deleting it turned off the alarms. Every night, I backed up the latest corrupted version he touched. stored it in a separate folder, labeled each one Connor Day 1, Connor Day 2, like a sadistic advent calendar. I wasn't sabotaging anything, I was archiving the exact moment the system went from pristine to poisoned. On day 6, he asked me what EBIT to adjust meant. On day 9, he told me he cleaned up some legacy clutter by deleting an entire worksheet labeled 2025 forecast assumptions. Didn't seem relevant anymore, he said. It was linked to every P&L projection for the next 3 quarters. But sure, irrelevant. By day 13, I'd finished the full handoff. My legacy was now officially in the hands of someone who thought reconciling deferred revenue was optional if the vibes are right. On my last day, I left a note inside the source folder labeled Backup Structure Archive. Just one sentence: may your numbers balance better than your ego. Then I walked out, calm, steady, vindicated. They thought they fired me. All they did was set the countdown. On his first solo week, Connor waltzed in wearing a hoodie that said "Trust the process," which was rich coming from someone actively strangling the process with a USB cable. He plugged into the master budget file like he was defusing a bomb, except instead of snipping wires, he was snipping logic. One tab at a time. First went the error check columns, those gray-shaded rows that quietly flagged missing inputs or misaligned assumptions, gone. Clutter, he called it. I saw it in the version history the same way you'd see tire tracks over a crime scene. Next, he overwrote the validated templates. Templates I'd spent years aligning with audit requirements, legal policy changes, and system migrations. He replaced the headers with Comic Sans. Comic, Fing, Sans. Slack lit up with his masterpiece an hour later. Connor just cleaned up the spreadsheet graveyard. Direct litter efficiency equals fire fire fire. 2 interns clapped back with fire emojis. One added a gif of someone vacuuming. I stared at it like it was an obituary for accountability. He'd gone full scorched earth. Deleted linked tabs with trailing dependencies, renamed budget versions without preserving the lookup paths, even flattened one of the quarterly close workbooks into a single sheet of hard-coded values, turning dynamic logic into static fiction. Every time the model tried to scream, he muted it. Error messages, disabled, warning cells, hidden. It was like watching someone install a security system and then bury the manual in a sandbox. Meanwhile, I opened my old drive, my real drive. I'd started the backup protocol before HR even blinked. Copied every Q1 Q4 model since 2018, zipped and encrypted them, and stored them in a drive so discreet it looked like a lipstick tube. My notes were already exported, version histories, control logic summaries, even my side annotations that explained why I'd built the European tax filter the way I did. Spoiler. Because Germany doesn't play around with revenue recognition, and one mistake there can lead to EU sanctions. While he hacked away like a blind surgeon, I was archiving every knife he left in the patient. By Friday, he deleted the currency conversion tab I'd labeled Do Not Touch. It was a dynamic sheet that pulled exchange rates from a secure feed, recalculated revenue forecasts across 5 business units, and accounted for weekend rate variances. In its place, a cell labeled USD equals default with no formulas, just a typed-in number, 1.00. I didn't even flinch. That night, I closed my laptop, plugged in the drive, and synced the last snapshot. Connor destroyed final. I considered leaving a warning, something like backups exist or audit trail lives elsewhere, but that would have been mercy, and I was fresh out of that. Instead, I opened a clean text doc and wrote the index list. Version, FY24 Master v5.3 Final. Edited, FY24 Master v5.4, Connor Initial Edits. Edited, FY24 Master v5.7, Control Columns Removed Edited. FY24 Master v6.1, Currency Flattened Edited. FY24 Master v6.4 Forecast Errors Introduced. Archived. All then I ejected the drive, slipped it into my coat pocket, and left the building with nothing but my purse. A cold Starbucks and the satisfaction of knowing I had receipts older and more reliable than his resume. He thought he erased me, but all he did was wipe his fingerprints onto a bomb I already disarmed and backed up in triplicate. The Monday after I walked out of that mausoleum they called a finance department, I bought a $4.99 bottle of Versailles, opened a blank Word doc, and titled it Resume, because apparently I'm not dead yet. That first week felt like a reboot I didn't ask for. I wasn't sleeping in or crying over boxed memories, I was recalibrating. 20 years in one place leaves a mark. You start thinking your worth is measured in payroll codes and Outlook invites. But once I shook off the corporate haze, I remembered something. I'm really damn good at what I do. So I built my own little war machine. Started with a website, nothing flashy, just clean, navy on white with a name that said I meant business. Ledger Line Consulting. I wrote the tagline in one sip of that warm Marseille, built for accuracy, paid in respect. Then I joined every industry Slack channel and professional group I could find. The digital equivalent of walking into a room, fixing my blazer, and saying, all right, who here is tired of rookie errors and Excel hotshots with half a brain cell? Didn't take long. By week 3, I had my first gig. A mid-sized logistics firm whose controller took early retirement and left behind a jungle of spreadsheets so messy it looked like a raccoon had been nesting in them. I tamed their entire Q3 forecast in 5 days, rebuilt their reporting system, and added 2 internal controls they didn't even know they needed. They asked if I'd stay on. I told them no, but they'd be fine. I documented everything and handed over a system even their interns could use without setting the place on fire. Contract number 2 came from a real estate group in Denver. Their books weren't broken, just nervously twitching. They'd grown too fast and were using outdated templates for lease amortization. I rebuilt the models, trained their staff, and threw in a presentation on how not to get audited into oblivion. They sent me flowers. Twice. That's how it started, quietly, efficiently, one job to the next. No office politics. No budgeting meetings led by guys who thought pivot tables were dark magic. Just me, my spreadsheets, and my rate, which, by the way, was now 3 times what I'd earned in-house. And then came the dinner invite. Client number 2 introduced me to her friend, a merger attorney named Dana, who worked with private equity firms. We met at a wine bar with chandeliers shaped like upside-down decanters. She wore a black turtleneck and smelled like money and lavender. Halfway through our drinks, she asked, "You used to work for Redacted Corp, right?" I nodded. She sipped her Malbec, gave a knowing smirk, and said, "Interesting. They're prepping for merger. But rumor is, their books are a mess." My eyebrow twitched just once. I said nothing. "They'll never admit it, of course," she went on. But some red flags popped up in pre-audit prep. Big ones. Sloppy deferred revenue, inconsistent amortization, weird treatment of foreign income. Sound familiar? I smiled like I didn't already know the exact cell references she was talking about. Then she leaned in slightly and added, "You ever think about returning? As a consultant, I mean. Could be lucrative if they're desperate enough." I swirled my drink and said, "Only if they're really desperate." But inside, something lit up. A tiny, wicked ember. Because I'd seen the storm brewing in that folder labeled Connor Destroyed Final. And I knew eventually they'd come knocking. And this time, I wouldn't answer the door unless they came with a contract. And a pen made of gold. It started with a text at 11:42 p.m. from Maya, one of the junior analysts I used to bring coffee to during Hell Month reconciliations. "Did you hear about the Q2 close mess?" I stared at it for a second, smirked, and went back to brushing my teeth. That was the first crack. Then came more. They had to reclassify like half the revenue line last minute. Connor blamed Brianna for a formula error, but it was his edit, 100%. He deleted the reclass instructions tab, just deleted it. They rolled in like little digital raindrops on a windshield. Tiny at first. But I knew the storm was forming behind them. At some point I stopped replying. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew the rhythm already. I'd seen it before, just never from the outside. The close would go off the rails, the team would panic, upper management would sniff out chaos, and then the finger-pointing would start. It always did. But this time, I wasn't in the line of fire. Connor, apparently, was unraveling like a clearance tie at a wedding. He'd started assigning blame in Slack, publicly tagging junior staff on threads like who was responsible for cross-department validation on this, like the interns had built the broken system from scratch. Word was he even tried to redo the entire P&L template 2 days before the board report deadline, because he had a better vision. The man had all the financial foresight of a squirrel on Red Bull. Meanwhile, I was wrapping up a new client contract for a private education group. They needed a custom model for federal grant tracking. Clean work, precise, zero drama. I finished it early, invoiced at my new rate, and used the bonus to book a weekend cabin in the Adirondacks. I hiked, drank too much bourbon, and thought about how peaceful it is when your work doesn't involve unpaid damage control. Then the real storm hit. A friend from legal, someone I'd once helped bury a 5-year-old contract clause that saved the company $2.3 million in penalties, called me under the guise of just catching up. "Word is they already submitted the merger prep docs," she said. "But they're rushing, really rushing. No internal audit sign-off yet," I blinked. "No internal audit?" I asked slowly. "For merger?" She laughed, but not like it was funny. "They think if they hurry, it can bury whatever issues show up before due diligence kicks in." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. "Connor's name keeps popping up," she added. "People are whispering about mismatched revenue lines, stuff not tying back to the Q1 baseline, and no one can find the backup assumptions." Of course they couldn't. He'd nuked them. He'd wiped years of rigorously maintained documentation and replaced it with some middle school art project he called a clean sheet. My phone buzzed again, another old coworker. Brianna just cried in the bathroom. Connor said her forecasting logic lacked hustle, then another. Maya told him we had an error sheet before. He said it wasn't needed in a modern structure. She almost threw her mouse at him. I leaned back in my chair, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out the window. This wasn't just karma. This was architecture, my architecture. Watching it collapse under someone else's ignorance felt like watching someone try to remodel a house by kicking out the foundation and wondering why the roof fell. The merger docs were out. The numbers were flawed, and my name? My name was starting to echo in their meeting rooms like a ghost with a ledger. They couldn't see me, but they could feel me. And soon enough, someone would have to say it out loud. Who built the originals? And when they did, I'd be waiting, with a smile. And an invoice? The message came in at 7:13 a.m., wedged between a DoorDash promo and a spam email trying to sell me luxury Excel macros, don't ask. It was from Jonah's, quiet guy, sharp with consolidations, always kept a spreadsheet open like other people carry rosaries. Hey, external auditors flagged something? Big, Connor's freaking. Thought you should know, no pleasantries, no emojis, just the crack of thunder before the downpour. I put down my coffee, suddenly wide awake in that cold, electric way that only comes when your past starts bleeding into someone else's crisis. By noon, I'd heard from three more. Whisper pings, coded phrases like, what did you use to tie foreign revenue lines again? Did you ever document assumptions for deferred roll forwards? Did the old template have a logic path for intercompany eliminations? We can't find it. Translation? The scaffolding had collapsed. Turns out, when the auditors started combing through the merger documentation, they hit a snag. Then another. Then 12. The numbers in Q2 weren't matching Q1 baselines. Deferred revenue looked inflated. Revenue from their European division was somehow being recognized twice, and no one could explain why. Connor was apparently triple-checking figures like a gambler watching a roulette wheel, hoping red comes up 3 times in a row to cancel the last 2 mistakes. Called an emergency meeting to revalidate assumptions, which, in finance speak, is code for someone please find the parachute we're spinning. According to Maya, God bless her rogue updates, he stormed into the meeting room with color-coded printouts, started pointing at random cells, and said something like, there's supposed to be an error message here. Someone, probably Brianna, muttered there was. And just like that, my name slid into the room. Who built the originals? Silence. Then wasn't that her? One of the junior analysts apparently pulled up an old training deck I'd made on the revenue recognition flow. A PDF. Page 6 had a diagram that mapped deferred recognition through 5 entities with conditional logic in red. The footer read, prepared by, my name SR, Finance Strategist 2023. I imagine the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Connor, according to the Slack leaks, did not take it well. He started talking fast, defensive, said I'd built the system in an outdated format, and that no modern financial model relies on error check flags. Which, to be clear, is like saying pilots don't need warning lights because they can just feel when the engine's on fire. That afternoon, the audit team requested version histories. Not the versions he had, mine. The ones with proper naming conventions, notes, and links to documented assumptions. They couldn't find them, because he'd erased them, because he thought he was smarter than the system, because he thought I was just some relic with color-coded tabs and too many backups. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, opened the drive labeled Legacy Vault, and scrolled through the neat, unbroken chain of models, each one more precise than the last. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. My silence was louder than a press release, because now they needed me. They just hadn't admitted it yet. It was 9:46 p.m. on a Friday when my phone buzzed with a blocked number. Not a text, a call, which in this day and age is the corporate equivalent of showing up at someone's house in the rain with a boombox and a confession. I let it ring twice, sipped my wine, let it ring once more, then answered with the kind of calm you earn after 2 decades of fixing other people's financial dumpster fires. Hello? A pause, then, hi. This is Evan, Evan Marks, CEO. He said his own name like I wouldn't recognize it. As if I hadn't been in the back row of his quarterly town halls, watching him click through culture slides with all the sincerity of a hostage video. He sounded tired, not his usual upbeat faux visionary voice. No corporate buzzwords, just warn, I hope I'm not calling too late. You are, I said, but go on. Another pause, deep breath. I could practically hear his tie loosening. There's an issue, he said, a discrepancy. $12 million. That's how deep the rabbit hole went. 12 million in misallocated revenue spanning 2 quarters, mostly foreign transactions, compounded by bad assumptions and a broken audit trail. The auditors found it. The merger attorneys escalated it. And now the whole damn deal was teetering like a drunk on a bar stool. We're just looking for clarity, he added, on some of the original model logic. It's a little unclear how things were structured, especially around deferred revenue from international contracts. I almost laughed, almost. Which version of the model are you looking at? I asked. He hesitated. I'm not sure. Connor said. Connor doesn't know what he's looking at. I cut in. He thinks net present value is a social media metric. Silence. Right? He mumbled. Another pause, and then, like a man trying to ask someone to prom after egging her locker, would you consider coming in? Just for a few days, to help clean this up before the next round of due diligence. I let it sit. I wanted him to sweat, not because I'm cruel, but because I'd earned this moment. The quiet power of being needed by someone who once wouldn't learn my name without an org chart. I swirled the wine in my glass, stared at the flickering city lights, and smiled. Of course, I said sweetly. My current rate is $5,000 an hour, 40-hour minimum. Standard consulting contract applies. You'll need to wire half up front. Dead silence. I could almost hear him recalculating how much pride he was willing to swallow. Then, that's reasonable. Of course it was. Because when the stakes are a multi-million-dollar merger and you've burned the only bridge to the original architecture of your financials, suddenly respect becomes very affordable. I'll have legal send over the paperwork tonight, he added. Can you be here Monday? I'll think about it, I said, and ended the call before he could thank me. Then I opened my laptop, clicked into the folder marked Consulting Decks, created a new doc titled Client, Company Name Emergency Audit Recovery Plan. I filled out the first slide header. Step 1. Never fire your architect mid-renovation. And for the first time in months, I slept like a goddamn baby. Monday morning, 8:57 a.m. I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor for the first time in 4 months. The marble still had that faint chemical shine, like someone had scrubbed the gilt off the tiles overnight. The receptionist, new, young, clearly briefed, stood a little straighter when I said my name. Conference room B, she stammered. They're waiting for you. Of course they were. I walked the hallway slow, deliberate, the way you do when you know every shoe squeak is a drumbeat of someone else's panic. I could feel the tension before I even opened the door, air tight enough to chew. And there he was, Connor, slouched in the far corner of the boardroom, pale and sweating through his lavender dress shirt. I counted 3 different shades of flop sweat between the collar and the pit. He didn't meet my eyes. Smart choice. Across from him sat Evan, the CEO, and 2 board members I'd never met in person. Legal counsel was there too, straight-backed and grim. A woman from the audit firm sat to the side, laptop open, glasses low on her nose like she was preparing to cross-examine everyone in the room. I set my laptop down, clicked the remote, and my first slide appeared on the screen. Forensic reconstruction of deferred revenue FY24, no hellos. No small talk, just blood on the spreadsheet. Let's start with line 272 in the original model, I said, voice crisp. That line calculated deferred revenue across multi-year contracts in the EU zone, accounting for local reporting laws and exchange fluctuations. I clicked again. Connor deleted the conditional logic that protected the quarterly roll forward. As a result, revenue from certain Q1 contracts was fully recognized in Q2, despite 0 delivery milestones met. The room stayed silent. I advanced again. This triggered a cascade failure across the global forecast, misrepresenting revenue by approximately $12.3 million. Here, another slide, a side-by-side comparison of my final version and the Frankensheet they were currently using, like showing someone an original Picasso and then a napkin doodle drawn by a drunk raccoon. Connor opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Wasn't labeled clearly, he muttered. I didn't blink. There was a note in the top right cell, Connor. It said do not delete EU deferral logic tied to fiscal compliance. Bolded, red text, border box. I even used Comic Sans to make it obnoxious. He wilted. The audit rep scribbled something. I kept going. Cold, unapologetic, just the facts. The control columns he'd hidden triggered the alert system that flagged missing contract milestones. Version history he deleted contained my quarter-by-quarter rationale, archived and cross-referenced with legal's compliance matrix. The flat currency rate invalidated every multinational projection in the M in a packet. This wasn't a model issue, I said. This was a structural sabotage of internal logic by someone who didn't understand the architecture he was dismantling. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Board members whispered to each other. One of them, gray suit, glasses, no nonsense, leaned forward. Can it be fixed? Yes, I replied, but not by repatching bad logic. You don't put duct tape on a cracked foundation. You rebuild with the original blueprint. Another click. I pulled up my archive, FY24 Master Protected Rebuild. Time-stamped, documented, untouched. And there it was, the lifeboat. The silence afterward felt like reverence. Evan cleared his throat. Would you be willing to lead the recovery process? I paused, looked around the room, then let my eyes settle briefly, very briefly, on Connor. My contract covers up to 40 hours. After that, we renegotiate. The audit rep smiled. The legal counsel looked relieved. Connor looked like he might puke. I shut the laptop. I'll send my invoice by noon. Then I walked out, heels clicking like punctuation marks down the hallway. They didn't just need me, they remembered me. The next morning, I got the follow-up email at 6:08 a.m. sharp. Full board convening today. Please be available for debrief. Confidential. 2 hours later, I was seated at the head of the same table where I used to take notes for people who now couldn't spell accrual without me. The coffee was hotter, the air tenser. Connor walked in looking like a defendant about to hear his sentence. And then, before I even opened my laptop, the chairman turned to him and said, Connor, please wait outside. He blinked, twice. Is this about the misunderstanding with the outside? He stood, stammered something about needing his laptop, and shuffled out like a school kid sent to the hallway for eating glue. Once the door clicked shut, they all turned to me. I didn't rush. I pulled up the models, calmly walked them through every failure point, every missing link, every error flagged and ignored. I had visuals, I had logic maps. I even had a short screen recording of Connor deleting a protected formula while humming. No one interrupted. When I finished, the CFO, who had once told me I was too detail-oriented to lead strategy, cleared his throat and said, We'd like to formally offer you a role. Permanent, Executive level, I smiled and slid my business card across the table. One side bore my name. They're my firm's tagline in clean black serif, built for accuracy, paid in respect. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I don't do full-time anymore. He nodded, eyes tight, jaw tighter. Then Evan stood and extended his hand. His palm was warm, but his voice was cooler than usual. We should have listened, he muttered. I shook his hand and replied, you should have read the spreadsheet. As I walked out, I passed Connor in the hall. He was standing with someone from HR, pale, clutching a manila folder like it might grow wings and fly him out of there. He didn't speak, didn't look up. The next day I heard he was gone, quietly. No announcement, no email, just vanished like a formatting error in a locked cell. And me? I submitted my final invoice, 40 hours at $5,000 an hour. They paid within 2 hours, no revisions requested. By Friday, I was back at my desk at home, a candle burning next to my laptop, Billie Holiday playing low through the speakers, and a new client inquiry blinking on my screen. This one? A former board member. Referral, full scope, top rate. Funny thing about respect, once they lose it, they pay double to buy it back. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.